I hope all of you can hear me well. Welcome all to the session, Inter-Korean Agricultural Development Cooperation for Realization of Peace Economy on the Korean Peninsula. Very happy we can be here today. I'm grateful to our host at the Korea Global Forum for Peace. And I'm very happy for our organizers of this session, which is a Rural Research Institute under the Korea Rural Corporation. And especially I'm very happy that we have such a distinguished panel of presenters and discussants, and at the same time a little bit worried because we have quite a large group of them here, and I hope we can do it all time-wise especially. My name is Bernhard Seliger and I work for the Hans Seidel Foundation, and we have the pleasure to work with the Rural Research Institute here represented by Dr. Kim since a few years very intensely on agricultural development in DPRK. We have today 3 presentations and 2 of our presenters are online. I hope both of you can hear me well. Maybe you make a nod. Yes, I see it there. We have, first of all, Mr. Tim Zakernak, whom I can greet here in Beijing. Don't know, is it your office or your living room? Happy to have you here. Last time we met in Pyongyang in the interagency meeting 1 or 2 years ago. And now we meet you here in your Beijing office and on this important forum. Mr. Zakernak has been a consultant on agricultural development for 25 years in Western China, so he has a really an extensive experience there. Plus, he has a very intensive experience in the last 2 years, 3 years in DPRK in North Korea, where he also worked on a consultant for FAO and for very important projects on green development in DPRK. Second of our line of presenters, distinguished presenters, is Professor Wen Ji from Yambian University. Hello to Yambian University. I hope you can hear me too. Yes, that's wonderful. I'm a great fan of Yambian University. It was first time, I think, almost 30 years ago when I came there, and we work very intensely with your university. I'm very grateful for that. And you introduced us to the city of Rason, so close to your university, where you did a lot of great work. And we hear today from Professor Ji about peaceful economy of the Korean Peninsula and agricultural cooperation, China, North and South Korea. Professor Ji is very much involved, especially in academic cooperation projects, and I'm already very happy to hear about his presentation. Last but not least, we have one real presenter here, offline, so to speak. That's Mr. Kim Gwan-ho, senior researcher at the RRI and our good friend and colleague, who is talking about economic effects of agricultural development zones in DPRK. Very interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to hear his presentation on that. And then we have 3 panelists. First of all, Mr. Jong-min from Korea Peninsula Agrofishery Cooperative, who will comment mainly on the paper of Professor Ji. Then it's an interesting thing. If you think about the economic development of a country, in most countries we would look maybe what is GDP growth, what is export and import growth. And in North Korea we look what's the rice price like, what's the harvest like. So we have a very close and intense relation of agriculture and economic development, more than many other countries maybe. And so I'm very happy we have here Dr. Lee Jong from the Hyundai Research Institute, because she's specializing in economic development of DPRK of North Korea, and she will comment on the paper of Professor Kim. Finally, last but not least, to my very left, there's Dr. Wierzbowski of Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, who will comment on the paper of Mr. Zakernak. Mr. Wierzbowski has been a long-time visitor to DPRK agricultural zones and other places, and has a very good on-the-ground knowledge also, which might help there. Now, all of you realize, after this long introduction, it will be very, very difficult to time manage you. I want to give every panelist or 3 presenters here between 15 and 20 minutes, but that should unfortunately include also the transition from one to the next, including getting the video presentation online. So I hope that works well. And then I want to give our 3 discussions between 7 and 10 minutes each. Now, in the background now there should be a QR code coming up. Maybe you can put it in. No, that's not a QR code. That's for those of you who have questions, especially those of you who are online all over the world, hopefully, you can ask these questions and use this QR code to send them in. They will hopefully pop up here then, and then we can feed them into our discussion feed. So that was a long introduction, and now, Mr. Zekernak, please, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to have this opportunity to participate in this event. And I'm very sorry that because of the pandemic situation, we couldn't meet in person. Because I was looking forward to meeting some real DPRK specialists through this event. I just want to start by saying that as the introduction said, I am not a DPRK specialist. I've spent 25 years in China doing rural development work, rural development projects. My first time to DPRK was 2 years ago when I came with FAO, where I was team leader of a group to do an overall comprehensive review of the agriculture sector and identify opportunities in the agriculture sector. And then last year I spent 4 months total in DPRK, again working with FAO. So a lot of what I say might be completely wrong. I rely on the real DPRK specialists to tell me where I've got it wrong and where I might have it right. Okay, so what I'd like to do is share my experience in international development work, especially in China. And I think my years of experience have shown to me that the real test, if you want to design effective, useful things to do, implement good projects, is you have to find out how things really work. And how things really work is not how people say they work, how the policy says it works, or how the books say it works. How things really work at the ground level is often very, very different. Second step the first step is you have to learn about the physical resources, the soil, the geography, the weather, the water resources available, the transportation, energy infrastructure, and so on. You have to understand all these things if you want to start to get an understanding. The next step is the institutional and the organizational environment which controls people's lives. It's very important to understand this, to know what can be influenced, what can't be influenced, and so on. And the institutional and organizational environment includes both the vertical and the horizontal linkages between different organizations, and it includes the incentive systems that operate within the organizations themselves as well. It's very important to learn about. For example, here in China, what I learned, you've got, for example, Ministry of Agriculture, which is at the apex of the agriculture system, and that extends right down to the county level and sometimes to a township level where they have departments and bureaus of agriculture. But if you're in a county level, the Ministry of Agriculture is not the most important organization in your career. The most important organization is the county party secretary, the county personnel bureau, the county finance bureau, because those are the organizations which really influence your development prospects, your safety, security, and so on and so forth. So understanding those vertical linkages, what the incentive systems are and so on, is very, very important. So when we go into this, we should avoid assumptions and preconceptions about how things work. How things work in different countries is always quite different, and how things work at the grassroots level is always very different from what we think it is. Excuse me, I'm starting off here so quickly that I forgot to share my slides. Okay. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, the next thing, especially in agriculture, is you don't look at agriculture just in terms of producing and growing things. You've got to look at it in terms of the whole supply chain, where the inputs come from, how the outputs are distributed, and so on and so forth. Who benefits from increasing production or from improving the quality of products? So all these things are very important. The post-harvest handling, the storage, transport, so on, the responsibilities all along the way. These are all very important to understanding agricultural production and how to design a project. Now, there's another very important thing which I've learned here in China. Anybody who's worked in China for any length of time has heard this phrase, 中央有政策，地方有对策. The center has its policies or its measures, but locally we have our countermeasures. That's very important for trying to understand the way things really work. Let me just give you a small story. It happened to me when I was working in Anhui many years ago. In 1998, China had some very serious flooding along the Yangtze River. And a lot of that was due to deforestation on the hillside. So the central government came up with a policy, which is translated as grain for green, by which people would get a subsidy in cash and grain for taking sloping land above 20 degrees and returning that to forest or to grasslands. So it's a very sensible policy to deal with a very serious problem. But one time we were driving from Hefei to our project site, which is flat land, rice fields, and there were poplar trees planted in the rice fields. So I asked our project staff, what is this with the poplar trees in the rice fields? And they said, well, this is grain for green. They said that every county forestry bureau gets a management fee for implementing the project, so all the counties wanted to do that. I said, that's very strange because it's counter to the aim of the project. And I said, what do the farmers feel about this? And they said, well, the farmers like it because the farmers basically want to use the subsidy and then they go off to the cities and find work. So everybody was happy, everybody was following a policy, but at the ground level and at the middle level, they were devising their counter policies. Okay, so I think this idea of counter policies is important, especially in planned economies. And to understand how things really work, we have to try to understand these counter policies. Okay, so some tentative ideas actually, quick and simple idea or explanation of understanding the institutional structure and so on. In our visit to DPRK, this is a threshing room, threshing floor with a threshing machine. Now, the standard policy is all the grain, the rice, the corn is brought to the threshing room and it's all threshed centrally like this. Now, there's economies of scale, you've got expenses on equipment and so on and so forth, so it's a good idea. But it's also, the institutional background requires it to be done like this because when they do their threshing, apparently, the Ministry of Agriculture people come and they supervise the threshing to make sure that all the stuff that is being threshed is recorded and so that they can pay their, or meet their targets and so on. So the institutional structure determines how the actual production goes on. Today, in today's environment, where the grain is brought in from the fields by bullock cart, this doesn't make so much sense. In today's environment, with the flooding and so on, and the storms, much more sensible to have mobile threshers that go out into the fields. You don't have to. Then you just bring the grain back into the to the main storage. Okay, my insights are, on agriculture from my few visits. The first thing is you have to be aware of who's telling you the stories. In DPRK, when you have people who are allowed to meet foreigners, usually they come from the elite, well-educated, and they themselves have very little connection with the rural areas. So they themselves don't have personal experience in how agriculture really works. We have to get our insights from somewhere else. Planning the targets and distribution. I couldn't get a clear idea, but as far as I can gather, it's similar to what happened in China before they reformed the economy, is at the national level, there's global targets set for the whole country, which are passed down to the provincial level. At the provincial level, they pass them down to a county level, and it's at the county level that the specific targets for production for farms, cooperative farms, are set. But different products are under the responsibility of different agencies. Grain is under the responsibility of the Ministry of Agriculture. I understand meat, vegetables, and things like that come under the responsibility of the Ministry of Commerce. Distribution systems, there was always a question about how distribution systems work and what role the market plays and what role the PDS plays. Very difficult because there's very little information that's actually available on this. But for example, last year when we did the FAO WFP Food Security Assessment Mission, we had a visit to a rural market on our schedule, but when we got to the countryside, we were told it was inconvenient to go visit a market, so we never did see a market. But to get some insight, one time we were visiting a county-level tree nursery, and I saw some aronia bushes, some seedlings for aronia bushes that were in the nursery. I asked the nursery manager how those were going to be distributed. And he said some of them would be distributed by plan, some would be sold in the local markets. And I thought, well, that's very sensible, because obviously this guy at a county level is probably got a budget deficit every year, so he has to devise his local policies, and he takes these resources and he sells them locally. I once had a chance also to meet with a cooperative manager, and I asked him about his planning efforts for the next year, and he said that he was planning to expand their fish pond on the cooperative to better feed the kids in the daycare center and in the schools. And I asked where he would get the investment resources for it. He said that he had no investment resources, but he could use products from the farm to barter with local suppliers to get the necessary resources for his planned fish farm. And I asked him whether he needed authority or approval to do it, and he said if it was taking up grain production land, he would need approval, but if it didn't take up grain production land, he wouldn't need approval. So these are just some insights. It's obvious that a market does exist, the trading does happen, but the exact extent of it is hard to understand, to get a handle on. Okay, now on the operation of cooperatives, I think that is a really critical question, but one that I still do not have a clear understanding of. If you want to design good agriculture development projects, we have to understand how much autonomy, how much authority local cooperative managers have, what the internal decision-making systems are, the internal distribution mechanisms, and so on. As far as I can understand, it's not too different from the situation in China prior to the reforms, is that the people working on a cooperative, they get work points for the efforts that they've done. At the end of the year, the cooperative settles its accounts and makes payments and allocates grain to individuals on the basis of their work points. One interesting question is that I've tried to get a handle on is the cooperative managers, are they usually local people who grew up in those villages, or are they transferred from outside? And I think I'll give some interesting insight on how cooperative decisions are made. My suspicion is if they were local people, grew up in those villages, when it came to developing counter policies, countermeasures, they might favor things that improve the lot of the cooperative people themselves. If they've been transferred from outside, then it's more likely that their loyalties will be with the system, looking for transfer promotion within a system. So I suspect that insight onto where cooperative managers and cooperative technicians come from could give some idea about how decision-making actually happens, really happens on a cooperative. Private plots, we've got the idea, following the Soviet Union example, that private plots offer good potential for agriculture projects, but every time we raised the idea with the government, they said, forget about private plots. They want to work with cooperative production. Sloping lands are also an interesting feature on the cooperatives, because the sloping lands, any land above 20 degrees slope, is not managed by the cooperative. It seems that it's managed by Ministry of Land and Environmental Protection. So sloping land cultivation and use sort of falls between administrative chairs. And here we've got an example of sloping land that's being cultivated with perennial crops. People use that as an opportunity to improve their own supplement their own incomes, but environmentally, it's quite a disaster, potentially a disaster, especially if you have, like this last couple of months, a series of tropical cyclones, which you've got possibility for landslides, floods, and so on and so forth, if there's nothing to hold back the rain on those hillsides. Okay, so get into some of my thoughts on potential interventions that could be considered. In my mind, most effective interventions probably target subnational levels of the administration, counties, cooperatives, and so on. Providing production materials, pipes, pumps, plastic machinery, fertilizer, and things like that. I think those sorts of interventions are generally quite useful. We don't know how the output of a cooperative is distributed, but increasing the overall output of the cooperative has probably got benefit for the members of the cooperative. Quality seeds for vegetables, seedlings, saplings for orchards and so on, small livestock, pigs, goats, rabbits, those sorts of delivering inputs, I think, have got to be effective interventions. Beekeeping, honey production is an interesting one, because production of bees doesn't compete with other inputs for resources, doesn't compete for land, water, and so on. Plus, honey is a highly tradable product, easily stored, easily transported. So it's very suitable for some of the remote areas, which also tend to be some of the poorer areas. Inland fish farming seems to me an opportunity to develop, because fish farming sort of also falls between chairs. There's Ministry of Fisheries, which is responsible for specialized cooperatives, and Ministry of Fishery organizations. But inland fish farming, they don't take any responsibility for. Food processing, using simple low investment technology. It doesn't help to increase potato yields if most of your potatoes get spoiled because you have no storage. But simple technology, you can make starch noodles from potatoes, drying, pickling, things like that. You can process things to increase the availability over the year. Also, inputs to promote integrated production systems. So integrating forestry, livestock, and cropping activities offers some very good opportunities. Okay, I'm just watching the time here. There are also opportunities to increase production while increasing the resilience to climate change, introducing drought-resistant crops, varieties, doing things to improve the soil health, water harvesting, and things like that. There are opportunities to find complementary with government programs. Government has got a large emphasis on forestry, which many organizations have used to be able to promote cultivation of sloping lands, integrated production, and so on. We've never, despite the opportunities with private plots, we've been told that the government is not interested in supporting private plots. I think potential interventions also should grasp every opportunity possible to promote the dissemination of knowledge and the dissemination of inputs between different cooperatives, between different farmers, because cooperatives or farmers learn from each other much more effectively than they learn from others. So if, field visits, field days, things like that for horizontal transmission of knowledge, I think is a very useful intervention. And finally, urban agriculture offers some very interesting opportunities as well. Okay, finally, providing production inputs, things like these greenhouses. Now, greenhouses like this, they offer fresh vegetables in the wintertime, seedlings that could be transplanted into the fields, so you expand your double cropping opportunities, but it requires a certain amount of technology to be able to use them effectively. Okay, just two last final thoughts. One is that a bind that we find ourselves in is this international community looking at the development versus humanitarian things. Anybody who's dealt with the UN and tried to apply for UN sanctions exemptions has found that they always look at a humanitarian perspective and they will reject anything which they consider to be developmental. But in my view, anything spent to a dollar spent to increase food production is a dollar less it has to be spent on importing food. So I think the international community has to somehow get over this insistence on humanitarian and expand the view that development activities need to be supported as well. Finally, useful activities I've found done in agriculture development are empowering the people at the local level, create opportunities for them to devise their own countermeasures, because they are the ones that know how things really happen out in the field. We as outsiders will never know how things really happen. We will try our best to learn it. The more we know about how things really happen, the more effective we can be. But to enable local people to devise their own countermeasures is, I think, the best way to support effective development, rural development activities. Okay. I think I've just made under the wire by 15 seconds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zekanak. That was great start for our discussion here, and a lot of what you said really echoes also the experience we had in the field in DPRK, in forestry, in agricultural development. And I think it was very important how you showed how vertical and horizontal relations in decision making, in learning, etc., are very important to watch that. And I hope we can do that now also with our next presentation. And I would like to invite Professor Wen Ji from Yambyon University as our next presenter. And I'm looking very much forward, Professor, to your presentation.
Hello, everyone. It is a great honor for me to be participating in this meeting, and I think that this UNTAC conference shows that we are living in a new era. Today, I would like to talk about the Inter-Korean Agricultural Development Cooperation for realization of peace economy on the Korean Peninsula. And so, I will be speaking about the three-way agricultural cooperation in South Korea, North Korea, and China. And the first part will be on pursuing peaceful economy on the Korean Peninsula. President Moon said that the future 100 years is an important time for us to establish a time for peaceful cooperation, and we need to establish lasting peace, and that stable economic cooperation will lead to a stronger peace on Northeast Asia. Therefore, we need to create a virtuous cycle of peace and economic development. And ultimately, based on this, we want to develop a East Asia economic cooperation model. The vision of the Korean Peninsula peace economy is based on the various visions, the new northern policy and the new southern policy, and that we will create a Korean Peninsula peace cooperation and the economic cooperation also on the Korean Peninsula, thereby leading to a peace community in Northeast Asia and an economic community in Northeast Asia. Then, how can we pursue such a peace economy on the Korean Peninsula? First, we need to ensure peace in our daily lives. There should be a virtuous cycle between peace and economic development. In various areas, we need to create a community of interest. Also, economic activity needs to be facilitated and it needs to be expanded to Northeast Asia. Next, on the agricultural cooperation of North, South, and China. Inter-Korean and China agricultural cooperation should be on improving the livelihoods of North Korea by increasing their capability to produce agricultural produces, and the purpose is to lay the foundation for them to be self-sufficient in their food production. And it has to be based on the reality of North Korea. Recently, North Korea has carried out various economic policies, so the agricultural cooperation should be aligned with such economic policies of North Korea. And we should focus on the capability building of North Korean agriculture so that they can be self-reliant. In the North, they are focusing on 5 major areas. First, developing better seeds with higher yields. And second, they want to add science and technology to agriculture and farming in order to increase their yield. Third, they wanted to increase the area and land that can be used for farming. Fourth, in order to increase yield, they wanted to produce rice in areas where there were low yield. Also, that there will be programs that are very much aligned, that there will be good systems put in place. Recently, these are some of the agricultural policies that are being carried out by North Korea. They have the field responsibility system, which is the 포전 management responsibility system. So the ones who are cultivating the farms, they do it on their own and they are responsible for the yield, and they do the allocation according to their own management. And so this 포전 responsibility unit is that the original punjos have become more detailed, and 3 to 5 people are operating these fields, and depending on the yield that comes out of that field, they can allocate the produces and also the cash that can be that can come out of the field management. Currently, there are 27 special economic zones and also these special economic development zones. And out of these 27, 5 are on the agricultural economic development. There's Orang area, and they are developing seedlings and seeds and also fisheries. And there's also Pukchon area, and so it is for the fruits. And here they will also develop livestock. And there's Sukcheon area. It is located in Sukcheon of Pyeongan Namdo. And here they will develop good seeds and the processing of livestock and fruits and mushrooms production and processing. There is the Gangneung International Green Exemplary Zone. So this is located in Gangneung, and here they will develop organic agricultural products. And then there is Gangnam, which is in Pyongyang, and for this will be for the high yielding seeds development. Lastly, I would like to talk about the agriculture cooperation methods that can be implemented by the two Koreas and China. Developing the seeds and fertilizers for better yield. So, developing seeds, that is the number one priority of North Korea, and it is an area of priority that is being pursued in the agricultural development zones. So in the previous decades, South Korea also wanted to develop its own seeds that have higher yield to overcome the food shortage situation in the 1970s. This led to the development of Tong-il rice seed, and this helped Korea overcome its food shortage. Also, fertilizers is of much need. North Korea is lacking fertilizers, and it has imported a great amount of fertilizers. If North Korea can develop its own seed with higher yield and develop technology for fertilizers, they can become more self-sufficient. Next, the two Koreas and China can operate a pilot farm together. Korea is one of the major countries that are supporting developing countries. Likewise, China is a major donor, and China, in particular, is supporting Asian and African underdeveloped countries to improve the livelihoods of the people and also to reduce poverty. Korea is the 11th largest economy, and it has provided a ODA of 2.52 billion, and it is out of the DOC Club 15th in ranking out for the amount of ODA that they provide. Already, North Korea, in areas such as Orang, Bukchon, Sukchon, Gangneung, Gangnam, they have their agricultural economic development zones. And in these areas, they want to create a complex farming fields and farming pilot fields, and they want to use these areas to develop good seeds, and also they have the livestock areas. So in these areas, if the three countries could operate exemplary farms, then it will lead to more exchange, and it will lead to a comprehensive cooperation. And if it is successful, it will lead to a ripple effect. However, for this to be possible, there has to be government level support for the administration and funding of such farms. In the case of China, the Bukdaehwang Group in 2012 created a pilot farm, and they were able to double the yield at Nason economic zone. And there they did the farming in a greenhouse, which led to a better field, and they provided various fertilizers. In addition to that, they added nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus types of fertilizers. Also, they use herbicides, and it helped to reduce the manual work that had to go into farming. And this led to confidence in the farmers that they can, at 1 unit of the farm, produce 9 tons. And third, establishing an agriculture technology center. So another slogan and priority of North Korea is to integrate science and technology into their agriculture. And so South Korea and China at the major fields that the pilot projects will be carried out can create a agriculture technology center. Already, China is working in 17 countries, including Mozambique, Luanda, Laos, and East Timor, and others, and have already established such agricultural technology project centers. and in Africa and Asia and Southeast Asia into 20 countries. The Korea Rural Development Administration also has established the Korea Rural Development Administration has also established these COPIA centers. And at these COPIA centers, they are helping developing countries in Africa, Asia, and Central America to develop their technology. And so already for the past 10 years, such support has been provided by China and Korea. And this will contribute greatly to a customized technology that's right for DPRK. Fourth, there has to be modernization of the agricultural machineries and infrastructure. One of the reasons for such agricultural inefficiency is because the utilization of machines is very low. So the adoption of machineries is low, and already China and South Korea have advanced technology and machineries for agriculture. So that can be supported, and this can be connected with finding new land for farming. But at the moment, due to international sanctions, only the manufacturing technology can be supported because investment is not possible in this area. Fifth, we can think of nurturing the agricultural talent. So in the long term, it is important to train and educate those working in agriculture. Already, many North Korean talents are working on developing science and technology for agriculture at the centers for this. And if such training can be provided, then in the longer term, this will help build capacity. In Korea, there is a candy for one sore throat. And in the same way, in North Korea, they have something very similar. And also, the two Koreas share similar snacks as well. For example, there is a popular snack using shrimp, and there's one very similar to that in DPRK. And also for instant noodles, there are very similar types. And so the language, the names that are used for these products might be different, but in the content, it's very similar. And also in Korea, there is G Market, online commerce, and in the same way, North Korea has a marketplace for trading. So as we can see in this picture, in the economic area, there isn't such a big gap. There are actually a lot of similarities. So there are many similarities, and we can be connected economically. So economic unification is no longer just a slogan. It can become a reality, and objectively speaking, already it is taking place. So if the two Koreas take initiative for economic cooperation, it will lead to peace, and I am sure that this will lead to a peace economy being established on the Korean Peninsula. If you go to Pyongyang, you can see many slogans as the one you see here. So, live where you are, but set your eyes toward the world. So, although you are living in the DPRK, you should open up to the world and to set your eyes to the global market. Thank you.
Professor Lee, that was very interesting and a very passionate plea in the end for inter-Korean cooperation. I'm not sure how the South Koreans here would agree that there's a great similarity in products. That means you have already achieved some measure of integration, or is it just some copying of the outside? I wonder how they taste on the inside the same. I bought some of these goods you showed myself, actually, and some of them are quite okay. But certainly there is a scope for cooperation. I'm very grateful you mentioned especially this trilateral cooperation, because as you said, in the moment there are sanctions, there are economic tensions, and the direct cooperation seems for the time being not feasible. But that might all change, and we have now our third presenter, Professor Dr. Kim, who might explain to us how cooperation, direct cooperation, can come about. Please, I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, Dr. Kim.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Thank you. I am Kwan-ho Kim, and I am from the Korea Rural Community Corporation Rural Research Institute. Today, I'm going to talk about the development cooperation in the agriculture sector and the economic impact. So my presentation, I think, will be quite similar in line with the other presentation. And Mr. Zakener talked about, potentially integrating the production systems, cropping, and fisheries and whatnot. And also, Mr. Choi made many proposals that could potentially support the various cooperation. And I think my presentation will provide some models or proposals that are more specific to how the cooperation can take place. So let me talk about first what agriculture is just to set the tone for my presentation. As you can see in the diagram, of course, there are the production inputs that are necessary, fertilizers, pesticides, and you need soil improvement chemicals, and also you need agro-machinery, and you also need services and processing of food. And also there are seeds, new varieties that are necessary, and biotechnology that can promote agriculture. And also you can seek integration with other technologies like the information technology, IoT, and cloud. So agriculture should not be in a silo. It's linked with various industries and various technologies. Agriculture takes in DPRK takes up 20 to 25% of the GDP. So agriculture is a very important sector in DPRK economy. And agriculture is also an important piece in the creation of a biological community of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And agriculture is central to creating a virtuous cycle towards building a peace economy for both Koreas. And the North Korean government has set up a 10-year plan for economic development, and they have designated economic zones and economic development zones. And agriculture can have a place in these initiatives. And from the South Korean perspective, there is the new economic initiative for the Korean Peninsula, which is a broad vision proposed by the Moon Jae-in administration. And also we can derive unification dividends once we are able to further promote the agricultural sector in North Korea. Let me look at some of the media coverage of the agricultural situation in North Korea. So you can see the picture on the upper left-hand corner in the greenhouse. You can see a lot of this is mechanized and very modern. But of course, how much of this is actually in operation needs to be seen. But in May this year, the Suncheon phosphorus fertilizer factory was built. So this is very significant. And another important thing is water management. In DPRK, there is a lot of water pumping station that needs to be operated, but this uses a lot of fossil fuels, so they try to improve the waterways to naturally facilitate the flow of water. And also, there is the effort to discover new plots of land. And so in the Pyeongbok area, there has been construction of tidal flat reclamation to fulfill this purpose. Just statistics on the agricultural facilities in North Korea. The water pumping station, the number of water pumping stations hasn't changed much. but the number of reservoirs have significantly increased, and the irrigation canals have also been expanded significantly. So North Korea is trying very hard to expand its key agricultural facilities. So let's talk about the food situation in North Korea. With typhoons and cyclones, there has been significant impact in North Korea. Also, due to the COVID-19, the North Korean food situation has worsened, and the continued sanctions has really worsened the situation. So COVID-19 and the sanctions have really worked to aggravate the situation. On top of that, there were floods and typhoons. So these are additional variables that have hit North Korean food conditions. And so again, North Korea has really suffered due to COVID-19 sanctions and the natural disaster, all of which have really aggravated the food situation. So the Unification Ministry in Korea has estimated that North Korea probably suffers about 860,000 tons of grains in shortage. Perhaps this could actually be, the shortage could be increased to 1 million tons. Now, let's take a look at some of the economic zones. In Kim Jong-un administration, there has been a lot of, new economic zones that were designated, and Professor Choi mentioned there's Pukchong, Orang, and Sukchon, and also there are 5 agricultural development zones. And food processing and various activities are the focus of the agricultural development zones. So let me just focus on the 3 major agricultural development zones. Sukchon, by the way, has more detailed plans that have come directly from North Korean government. And so the goal of setting these agricultural development zone is to enhance the economy by fostering agriculture. And also, they want to build more integrated production systems at the county level. And organic farming, sericulture, seed development are some of the things that are focus of these agriculture development zones. And also, there is an effort to have resource cycling system linking agriculture and livestock farming. And we at our institute have done some research to further develop opportunities in the 3 agricultural development zones. Pukchong zone is well known for its apple production. And it's very good for fruit production in general. And because of the climate change, the apple growing zones are climbing upwards towards northern areas. So Pukchong is a place for fruit growing, and Orang is well known for the quality rice. And perhaps with more modernized rice production, and we could maybe add livestock farming and fish farming to the Orang agricultural development zone to make this more prosperous. Well, the South Korean government has been trying to develop these ideas, but North Korean government hasn't really responded with positive feedback yet. And I think it is important for us to provide detailed explanation about the project ideas to the North Korean authorities and to get their attention. And it is important for us to develop some pilot scale projects that they can readily accept. And moreover, we should not just focus on agricultural production, but we should also link this to livestock farming, forestry, and other related industries. And secondly, we shouldn't just focus on production increase. We should think about developing more complementary relationship between the 2 Koreas so that our agriculture can benefit each other. And also, it is very important to emphasize how this cooperation in the agriculture can promote peace and prosperity in the Korean Peninsula. North Korea and South Korea have some cultural similarities, and the agricultural cooperation can emphasize that and further contribute to peace and prosperity. Now, I would like to provide you a SWOT analysis of the Sukchon zone. Sukchon is located in the western coast, and it's a large field area where rice growing is very prominent, and also there are light industries that have developed around processing of fruit. And there are other industrial areas nearby which can make a supply of materials easier. And also, it is possible to expand projects within Sukchon area because they are also interested in doing organic farming. And you can also link with livestock farming. Now, the opportunities. There are various different processing industrial parks nearby, which can be linked to the agricultural project in Sukchon zone. And I think by linking these different industries together, we can further enhance the production volume. And so there are gradual programs that can take place. As Mr. Choi mentioned, organic fertilizers and grain production increase. All of these activities should be some of the key areas for a program for Sukchon Agricultural Development Zone. Now, this is the aerial view of what can happen in the Sukchon zone. So production increase can take place with better plots of land and modernization of facilities, and also organic farming, and also we could promote light industries that can be linked to agriculture, such as food processing. So these are some of the ideas that we have developed, and we need to prepare a very detailed proposal in order to get the North Korean government's buy-in. So through such cooperation, what kind of economic impact can we achieve? So we have conducted the industrial linkage analysis to understand the economic impact. Basically, this analysis to quantitatively understand the correlation between the industries. So we have external demand shift, which can have an impact on production, income, and employment. And we also take into consideration production generating multiplier and income generating multiplier. And we look at all of these different variables in this analysis. Now, this is a scenario for the Sukchon Agricultural Development Zone. So we looked at the investment proposal and the potential investment that can be made in this zone. In the case of Sukchon, the North Korean government hasn't specified the investment value. So just based on similar zones such as Bukchong, which is $100 million, and Orang, $70 million. So based on that, we kind of estimated that the potential investment in the Sukchon zone could be $120 million. And based on this figure, we have calculated the production multiplier, income multiplier, value add multiplier, and indirect tax generation multiplier. So these are the quantitative analysis we have done. And the economic impact coming from the investment. So year 1, 2, 3, and then the total numbers are laid out in this table. So the impact per unit of investment is also calculated in the rightmost column in this table. Agricultural Development Zone, of course, could should focus on maximizing the use of resources already available in North Korea, but there are some inputs that could be provided by South Korea, such as farming utensils or equipment and other supplies that can also have an economic impact in South Korea, including job creation. And secondly, in order to have a significant impact on North Korean economy, we shouldn't just simply provide capital, technology, but we should also increase the use of intermediate inputs that are produced from North Korea, so that both Koreas can really benefit from the economic impact. So how can we do this? There are certain supplies that don't exist in North Korea. Those can be supplied from South Korea. And then we could also utilize Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund, which can be used to finance some of the agricultural supply provision. And by promoting the cooperation in these zones, we can enhance reconciliation and build a common ground both in economic, political, and sociocultural terms. Again, there has been significant natural disasters in North Korea. Of course, it's important to have humanitarian aid provided to North Korea, but at the same time, we really need to provide the kind of support that involves the North Korean residents, and these types of projects can be such opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. And now please listen. In an offline forum, I'm sure there would be a big round of applause now for our three presenters, Mr. Zekanak, Mr. Lee, Professor Lee, and Dr. Kim. However, we are online here, so you have to imagine the applause yourself. It was very, very interesting here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion now. Dr. Kim looked at special economic zones, supply chains, and how they can develop. Clearly, one question is, where would $120 million come from for investment in one zone only? I mean, here we see really this big difference to, for example, the Chinese model of special zones, where basically the investment came from investors. I remember I was myself discussing with some German businessmen the Gangneung Green Zone, and the North Koreans told us basically, well, we provide the land, it's extremely valuable, and you provide all the rest. That might work under political circumstance if there's a deep-pocketed South Korean government saying we do it for political reasons, but probably not from economic investors. So that will be really a central problem. But we will, I hope, hear more about the implications for the economy now from our three discussants. And I would like, first of all, to ask Director Park from the Korean Peninsula Agro-Fishery Co-work, who himself, as I understand, was involved for a long time in a cooperative project in Kumgangsan, to comment. And we had the three presentations, and I know you have been assigned to one presenter as a discussion, but please feel free to comment on everything which comes into your mind also for the other presentations. Please, you have, since we had extremely good and disciplined presenters, you have 7 to 10 minutes. You can use also 10 minutes, please.
예, 반갑습니다.
It is a pleasure to meet you. As was introduced, I am Jungmin Park, Director of the Korean Peninsula Agro-Fishery Co-work. And I would like to thank CEO Kim of the Korea Rural Community Cooperation and also Dr. Kim, who carried the activities out on the working level for preparing this session. So on the three presentations, while I was listening to the presentations, I felt that from 2004 to 2008, the surrounding area of Kumgang and Kaesong complex, we had some work on developing co-op farms in North Korea. And so I thought about my experience as I participated in those activities with the presentations. What I wrote in my discussant paper is more of an overview, and what I will be actually saying in my discussion, it's more about the details. So on the first presentation, you talked about the structure and the importance of the actual field, the regions. Also, Mr. Wen-chu talked about the need to enable North Korea to be self-sufficient in agriculture, and that cooperation work should be focused on that. And the last presentation provided by Mr. Kim, I think, was more about the concrete areas, the agricultural special zones, how they can be developed, and in addition to that, he talked about the ripple effects that could be expected by the development of those agricultural economic zones. And in the future, as we implement agriculture cooperation, I think that their presentations, suggestions, and proposals are very helpful as we prepare for the future with North Korea. And I was a designated discussant for Professor Wen-chu's presentation, and he presented on ways for the three countries to cooperate, North, South, and China. At the moment, there are the United Nations sanctions and tensions between Washington and Pyongyang, so all of the cooperation work has come to a halt. And agriculture is about the food of people, and it's directly linked to livelihood. So I think this is an area that is connected with humanitarian aid. There are some exceptions in the United Nations sanctions, and humanitarian projects are excluded, and agriculture cooperation efforts, I think, may be an area that is exempted from the sanctions. Therefore, the Korean government, I think, may need to persuade the international society about cooperating with North Korea in this area. And we can work with China, which is a direct neighbor of North Korea. In particular, at the moment, we are in the process of revising the Inter-Korean Cooperation Act. And through the revision of this act, local governments can be the parties that cooperate with North Korea, and other government organizations or corporations can be the parties that cooperate with North Korea. So on a national level, if it's difficult to work with China, then maybe we can work with the three provinces in China and the provinces in South Korea, such as Gyeonggi and Gangwon, who share borders with North Korea, and agricultural organizations and authorities may be able to think of ways to work with North Korean cities or North Korean individual co-op farms. That might be a possibility. Based on our field experience in 2004, initially we carried out joint co-farming projects in the co-op farms. And then after that, we developed a hub, that area into a hub area for agricultural cooperation. And then we envisioned a belt area. So the surrounding areas of Kaesong Industrial Complex, and then the Kumgang Mountain. So it would be a South Sea and West Sea belt co-op belt, and we have experience carrying out those projects in 2004 to 2008. And Professor Wen Chu talked about the importance of self-reliance of North Korea, that they have to build up their capability. And the basic unit of agriculture and farming in North Korea is the co-op farms. So these co-op farms have to build up their capacity, and they have to develop a farming technology, and they should be the ones that increase the yield and the revenue. And so they are the ones who hold the keys to provide solutions to agricultural problems in North Korea. And Wen Chu, professor, stated that before Korea was able to achieve remarkable economic growth, we went through a phase of increasing the yield and developing seeds, rice seeds that have higher yield, such as the Tongil rice seed. And that is a process that North Korea may have to follow. And at the moment, it's not easy to work with them because of the United Nations sanctions. However, but to work with them, the very first problem that we need to tackle is the food shortage problem and agriculture farming problem. And from Korea's perspective, South Korea's perspective, the inter-Korean work has come to a halt. However, we have experience working with North Korea in the Kumgang area and the Kaesong Industrial Complex surrounding area. And we feel that such agricultural development work, the people working there can be in the future connected to the personnel and human resources that can work at the industrial complexes too. So this is more, of course, long-term down the road. And North Korea obviously needs to break away from just receiving emergency food aid. They have to be self-reliant, and they need to lay the foundation and infrastructure for that. And in that sense, North Korea has set 5 agriculture economic zones, and they are trying to implement unique projects in those zones. And in those zones, they will require economic cooperation that are large scale. But as the moderator has said too, for us to achieve that, there are many institutional and legal hurdles on the way at the moment. So it should be more phased out. It should be carried out in a step-by-step way. Initially, we can work with co-op farms, and then utilizing the results and outcome that comes out there, it can be connected with the hubs, and then those hubs can be made into a belt in the East Coast and the West Coast. This might be more realistic of an approach. And in this process, right now, country-to-country cooperation activities, since it is difficult, then local governments and agriculture-related organizations can take the initiative. They can be more active. And I'm sorry to say this, but maybe we can utilize China as a leverage. So to utilize China to begin and initiate the dialogue, because North Korea at the moment is resistant and hesitant about direct communication with South Korea. But it's my understanding that they still participate in international events, and they are engaged in international dialogue. So we can include them in discussions with Russia, China, and in particular, Primorsky, Russia. And if we create an international framework, then it will enable North Korea to participate For that to be possible, we need to understand the agricultural structure of North Korea. And so those who have experience working in the field in DPRK and researchers such as Dr. Kim, they have to participate. But I feel that at the moment, China has more access to North Korea at the moment. So the DPRK farming expert in China can be utilized to help us to understand China more and for us to widen the communication window with China. And such channels may be used to persuade the United Nations and the Korean government. So we need to be a bit more proactive, I feel. So we need to change our thought process. Of course, all areas of cooperation are important, but I would like to underscore once more that during the mid-1990s, during the arduous march, there were 1 million North Koreans who had starved to death. So this is about the actual directly linked to the survival of North Koreans, and it requires food security is required for the regime security of North Korea. So through agricultural reform, we need to address the food shortage situation in North Korea. And this is important diplomatically speaking and speaking from humanitarian sense. So agricultural cooperation is indeed important, and we need to make more efforts in this area. In ending, at the North Korean co-op farms, we have experience carrying out these cooperation work for 4 years with the North Koreans. And in the beginning, they were a bit hostile and they were passive in working with us in the beginning. But as the policies of North Korea change, and especially if they see with their eyes the actual results, we can gain their confidence, and the more contact we have with them, this will contribute to the grander goal of increasing the homogeneity of our two Koreas. And so we should be, compared to other projects, more proactive in agricultural cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Park. And now we come to the second discussion. That's Dr. Lee from the Hyundai Research Institute. Please.
네, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Haejung Lee from the Center for Unification Economics at Hyundai Research Institute. I thank you for the opportunity. I have heard with great interest to the presentations and also the discussion by Mr. Peck. And I think there was a common theme. That is, in order to cooperate with North Korea, we need to really understand our partner and build upon that to design the right kind of approach. And I really agree to that. I think that is very important thing to take away from our presentations today. Dr. Kim's second slide was very important, I think, that agriculture is very closely linked to other industries and technologies. I think that was very visibly persuasive. When we think about agriculture, and given the COVID-19 and the African swine fever and many natural disasters, we need to think about how to build a common ground of understanding and cooperation in order to address these various risks and challenges. And in that sense, our discussion today is very timely. And as you know, President Moon has been proposing the building of a peaceful economy and a community of peace on the Korean Peninsula. So again, this discussion is very timely. Right now, we are at a standstill when it comes to dialogue with North Korea. But in order to break through that standstill, we need to focus on, healthcare and disease control and agriculture, which all help to promote a community of life and ecology. And Mr. Che also talked about the peace economy. Peace economy is ultimately a way to promote a virtuous cycle of peace and economy. And this will then promote economic cooperation to continue, which could then help build co-prosperity, and the benefits can spread across different nations nearby. And so this is a very good virtuous cycle, and perhaps the inter-Korean cooperation, if done successfully, we are able to build peace on the Korean Peninsula, which can then impact China, Russia, and the entire Northeast Asian region. And so we already have experience of building certain cooperation projects, such as Mount Kumgang project. So we already have some experience of building peaceful economic activities with North Korea. And President Moon, in a speech, cited Kaesong Industrial Complex and Mount Kumgang project as an example of building a peaceful economy on the Korean Peninsula. So we need to think about what each Korea thinks about these opportunities. One way to do that is to look at the various statements that have come out of the dialogue between the two Koreas. First of all, in 1991, there was the Inter-Korean Basic Agreement. Article 15 says that the aim is to promote welfare for the Korean nation as a whole, and also to promote balanced development. And in order to do so, we need to promote economic exchange and cooperation. And also, in an addendum to this agreement, it talks about that the two Koreas should engage in cooperation in exchange of materials, coal, mining, and fisheries resources, and we should engage in cooperation in tourism, manufacturing, agriculture, construction, and financial services. So already there have been some common ground and understanding built between the two Koreas as to the kind of cooperation that need to take place. And also, in the June summit statement, it mentions the exchange and cooperation in the sociocultural, sports, health, and environmental issues. And also, in 2018 Panmunjom Declaration, it talks about how the agriculture, healthcare, and environmental protection are key areas where the two Koreas need to cooperate. And that was the joint statement, actually, in 2007. And in the Panmunjom Declaration, it talks about we need to pursue the projects that have been agreed upon and stipulated in the 2007 joint statement. So there have been this continuous building of common ground on what cooperation need to take place in the Korean Peninsula. And also these aspects have been reflected in legislation. And in the North-South Economic Cooperation Law that was legislated in 2005, Article 4 says, in pursuit of the benefit of the whole nation, to promote the balanced development of the nation's economy, and in accordance with the principles of mutual respect and trust and of reciprocality, the parties intend to pursue exchange and cooperation programs. And so, based on these agreements between the two Koreas, what kind of specific kind of projects of agricultural cooperation can we pursue? In the joint statement issued in 2018, the two Koreas agreed to develop the East and West Joint Special Zones and Agricultural Development Zone. So these are areas where there is already an agreement. On the East Coast, there is the Kumgang Mountain, and that would be the focal point for the tourism cooperation. And then on the western coast, there is the Kaesong Industrial Complex. So these special zones are areas where the two Koreas have already agreed are important places for cooperation. So these are areas where we can build on with new projects and also to revive older projects. And so if we look at the Kaesong Industrial Complex, actually we have stopped in the middle of the project. So there were supposed to be phase 2 and phase 3. It was originally planned as a massive scale project. So if we're able to revive the Kaesong Industrial Complex, this would also have ripple effect on, agriculture, because there would need to be some supply of food going into this complex as well. And in 2007, the joint statement, there is an agreement on building the West Coast Peace and Cooperation Zone. North Korea wants to build a Gangneung Green Zone, and perhaps we could think about linking with other zones in South Korea. And also, again, we need to think about possibility of pursuing the West Coast Peace and Cooperation Zone, which has been stipulated in the joint statement in 2007. And also, Sukcheon Agriculture Development Zone could be another place where real, meaningful cooperation can take place. Already, Professor Kim explained extensively about specific proposals for Sukcheon. This is an area where there are existing infrastructure for agriculture, and the climate conditions are quite good. And also, this place has previous international exchange experience with UNDP and the government of Switzerland and other private agencies. So there are very good conditions in place for agricultural development cooperation. And in the eastern coast, there is Wonsan and Mount Kumgang Special Zone, and the Hyundong Industrial Zone, and Sinpyeong Tourism Development Zone. And so we can have Orang Agricultural Development Zone nearby these different zones, so that there can be linkage effect. And Orang is an area well known for pine mushrooms and also rice, as Professor Kim mentioned. And Bukcheong zone is well known for apple. And we can actually utilize these places to promote food processing industries. And also we can link with fisheries in order to expand the food processing. And also, near the Orang zone, there is the Chilbo Mountain, which can be a great tourist attraction. So if we look at the investment proposal for Orang development zone, it includes modernization of the Orang airport and a facilitation of tourism in Chilbo Mountain. And near the Orang zone, there is Cheongjin Agricultural University, and there are other agricultural R&D centers. So these can be utilized to develop new varieties and new agricultural technologies. And in the Pukchong Agricultural Development Zone, they have the Pukchong Horticultural College and Pukchong Apple Research Institute. So with these institutes and higher education institutions, there can be a lot of exchange and joint efforts. One of the success factors for cooperation between the two Koreas is to work based on close understanding of each other, and that has been emphasized already by other presenters. And by cooperation, we mean that there is a party to the cooperation, so we need to recognize the other party. And so cooperation policies should be based on close communication and mutual understanding in order for the policies to succeed. Also, Dr. Choi brought up something. In the past, South Korean government was really focused on building bilateral cooperation, but we really need to focus more on the multilateral opportunities. In agricultural cooperation, there needs to be more international efforts in order to build support in the international community and also to ensure sustainability of the effort. Professor Kim said that the support should not be one-sided. One becoming really dependent on the other. But Professor Kim emphasized the mutual economic benefits that can be garnered out of developments in Sukchon area, for example. So we really need to have a broader understanding of potential mutual benefits so that the Korean public can also support these endeavors sincerely. What's more important is that the private sector, the local governments, and NGOs should have greater role in the cooperation efforts. So more diverse actors should get involved. And Mr. Park told about the cooperation law. Well, Kumgang Mountain and the Kaesong Industrial Complex went ahead because the private sector got involved very actively. In the past, the Korean Foundation for World Aid provided tractors and agricultural technology in 2006 to the Sukchon area. These are some examples that need to be replicated and also to be built on by having new models of cooperation. Thank you very much.
And last but not least, we come now to the comments of Dr. Wilczkowski.
Thank you very much. My name is Tomasz, and it's a great honor for me to be here in this panel. I don't want to be a black sheep here, but maybe just to balance the discussion, allow me to share my personal view on agriculture before jumping into any kind of inter-Korean or international engagement with North Korea. What's the agricultural situation right now? Well, I dare to say that North Korean agriculture is stuck in Middle Ages. The smart farms that Dr. Lee showed us, yes, they do exist, but these are exceptional cases exactly to be broadcasted in KCNA. But vast majority of agriculture is done by hands, bare hands, with very limited mechanization. Is done by the army. I mean, North Korean army is perceived by international community as a threat. For me, North Korean army is a cheap or even slave labor to do the agriculture. Lack of fertilizers, both in terms of quality and quantity. The domestically produced fertilizers are of poor quality, and there are difficulties to import them from abroad. Irrigation system. I mean, if you can imagine that hospitals in North Korea do not have running water, then you can easily compare the situation on the ground in the fields. I mean, irrigation is very underdeveloped, and obviously rice, historically and culturally, rice is cultivated in North Korea, and rice requires a lot of water. So the irrigation system is actually a huge problem. Lack of infrastructure. One potato farm I visited a couple of years ago, 30% of potato harvest was wasted because there was no storage facility. Crops are transported by oxes or hands on unpaved roads. And obviously there's a climate situation. I mean, typhoons, droughts, rains, hot summers, it all affects agriculture a lot. International political situation, sanctions, they do affect farming, they do affect agriculture a lot. And of course, domestic policies, poor policies. I mean, collective farms that were transformed into small-scale family-run farms are probably a good turn, but at the same time, adding more space to rise agriculture output, for me, is just a kind of reverse version of the law of diminishing returns. This is not the way it will work. Now, I want to pick up some insights that Mr. Zakernak rightly put. Vertical and horizontal relationship in North Korea. I mean, sloping lands being managed by Ministry of Land and Environmental Protection, whereas farming is managed by Ministry of Agriculture. Those ministries, they barely talk to each other, not to even mention cooperation. Different units, different ministries, different agencies in North Korea, they do not talk to each other. There's a top-down ordering and bottom-up reporting, but there is nothing horizontal in North Korea. And when international community engage with them, they have to talk horizontally. And I love the line by Mr. Zakernak that horizontal transition of knowledge will help them. Farmers will learn from farmers. Exactly, and this is where we, international community, should enter to build this horizontal relationship and not only preserve the vertical one. Yes, and there are different stakeholders. There are ministries, but they are on the provincial level and on the county level. There are party bureaus, and to do something meaningful, they need to cooperate, and they can cooperate when the international community engage with them. Now, a little bit off the topic, but what is really important, the development versus humanitarian support. And as Mr. Zakernak said, when we apply for UN sanctions, the humanitarian aspect of it is also always taken into account. Well, there has been a single country that was lifted from the poverty by humanitarian aid. The set and representative example would be Haiti, where 10,000 NGOs are present and operating, and still the country is relatively poor. In other words, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So the development, this transition of knowledge, the capacity building is extremely important, also in agriculture and in other aspects of life. Now, Orang was mentioned a couple of times as a special economic zone, special agriculture zone. I visited Orang last year in November. There's nothing there. Literally nothing. It's a bare field and one unpaved road. So those economic special zones, those selected zones, for me, they exist only on paper. There is no real policy that is implemented there to develop those zones. Now, about inter-Korean cooperation and any kind of cooperation with North Korea, when it comes to bilateral relation between South and North Korea, it's political. And without political will, there will be no cooperation at all. And as Professor Chi put it, trilateral cooperation. Yes, this is the way to do it. And I would even say more, multilateral cooperation. To engage with North Korea, we need to have multilateral arrangement with NGOs, with international organizations, with different countries, and this is how to engage them. This is how to do something meaningful. I will stop here, maybe just to open discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. And now, before I give the three presenters the possibility to answer, I have some more questions here. Two for Professor Ji, which were brought to me. I don't know where they come from. And then I would like also to ask a question each to Mr. Zakernak and Dr. Kim. So for Professor Ji, I don't know if you can show these two questions in the beautiful original Korean, but I want to summarize them as the following. one thing which has also been echoed by two of the presenters already. Professor Ji, what are your ideas for trilateral cooperation? Why is it better than bilateral cooperation, and how can North and South Korea profit from it? And the second question, Professor Ji, is North Korea actually willing to receive aid from South Korea? Are there ways and means to make them receive aid? And now my question to Mr. Zakanak. You have an experience of 25 years in China and this phenomenal way how China came out of poverty in rural areas, none the least by family-based agricultural system. And you yourself in your presentations several times mentioned they were not interested in the idea of private plots. Does it frustrate you to not be able to talk about these very important structural issues, but maybe just about fertilizers and technological issues and better seeds? And my question for Dr. Kim, so who will put up the $120 million? Is it your money? Where does it come from? So we have three presenters, and I would again go in the direction we had in the first place. So the first answer would be to you, Mr. Zakanak, in Beijing.
Okay, there we go. Actually, I'm not in Beijing. I'm up in Qinghai, up on the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, where its weather is much better than Beijing. Okay, first on the just the family farms, the family plots, and frustration with it. I think there are also ways to get around that. One is technical training. You give people on a cooperative technical training, they can use that on their family plot just as easily as they can use that out on the cooperative fields. And the other thing is through design of projects, you can offer opportunities for local people to have their counter policies. Last year, there was an interest in helping, in getting some funding for supporting schools. And the proposal we came up with, it never came to anything, was to distribute, every kindergarten or every nursery has its own small garden. I said, well, let's distribute high quality vegetable seeds, and those kids are going to put some of those seeds in their pocket and take it home, and that's a good idea. So there are ways to sort of get around that with clever design. Yes, it is frustrating because it's a political thing, but ways to get around it. Now, it's interesting, this idea about the family farming and the cooperatives. In China, this was in my original speech, but I didn't have the time to mention it. In China, after 20 years of reform, they've discovered that the family farm is still too small of a scale to be economically viable and to suit modern supply chains. So since 2000, China has been strongly supporting cooperative, farmers' cooperatives, but on the international idea of cooperatives rather than the People's Commune. The cooperative law was passed in 2007. Most of my work in the last 15 years has been promoting cooperative management. So the co-op, if it's, depending on how it's run, how the decisions are made, how the output is distributed, the co-op is actually a very viable target for international assistance. But as I say, we need to know more about how things really are on the co-op before putting a lot of effort into it. But if you find cooperatives with capable, enthusiastic people, and I've seen quite a few of those in my field work, I think co-op is a good partner for agriculture development activities. Okay?
Thank you very much. And Professor Ji?
So, I received a question on the three-country cooperation methods, and so I proposed 5 ways, and you also asked a question about multilateral cooperation. In reality, they want bilateral cooperation, especially with China. But from China's side, they would prefer a 3-way cooperation. So North Korea will prefer bilateral. However, China prefers multilateral. And currently, is North Korea willing to receive aid from South Korea on that question? Kim Jong-un, in various media reports, he is saying that they do not need one-off aid. That if there is aid, it should be about development facility and production related and production method support. But that would be against international sanctions. They want infrastructure, they want sophisticated and advanced machinery and technology in order to increase their productivity. So they do not want humanitarian aid, temporary aid, one-off aid. That is their attitude. And next year in January, they will have the parties meeting. And in the party meeting, they will announce their 5-year economic plan. And in the 5-year economic plan, through that, we can assess the plans and tendencies and trends of North Korea's economy.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Kim?
네,
The agricultural development zone, how can we finance the investment? Well, there are two approaches, I think. So one is to seek domestic financing from South Korea and then also seek financing from international community. So first, domestically speaking, we have the Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund, which is designated for use in cooperation projects with North Korea. But there can be some difference in the amount that is actually supported depending on the proposal and the extent of investment required. And some of the funds was actually used in doing the projects in Kaesong. Also, we can provide loans to North Korea. That could be another option. But the important thing is that North Korea has very limited infrastructure in place. And the loans and the cooperation fund should be utilized to perhaps enhance the production infrastructure. But the private sector would not be able to take that big of a risk. So there are areas where the private sector investment is more appropriate, and then with regards to production facilities and infrastructure in general could be funded more by the Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund. And also there are maybe overseas sources such as World Bank, or International Agriculture Cooperation Fund, and EDCF has also different funding mechanisms. And if North Korea accepts those, perhaps the financing challenge can be resolved. And additionally, I would like to say whether there is an intention on the part of the DPRK to accept such aid. Well, Kim Jong-un has striven for different economic policies versus his predecessors. And so there are 27 economic zones. And investment proposals talk about the joint venture form, attracting international investment. Of course, the nuclear issue is a hurdle there. But anyway, the Kim Jong-un administration is really focused on economic development. And he also very much emphasizes the improvement of the quality of life of the people. So if the hurdles are removed, perhaps North Korea will be more open to accepting support.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. It's perfect. We have still 12 minutes left, and we have 3 presenters, 3 discussions. So what I want to do is for everybody a last one round to give his thoughts. What can be done now? We all say, if we accept, this happens. If the nuclear issue goes away, that can happen. But what can we do now? And I want to start with Director Beck. Sorry for calling you Pak before. I didn't see it. It's Director Beck. And you are the first one. 2 minutes.
좀 더 구체적으로 아까 최문 교수님 말씀하신
So Dr. Kim and Professor Che talked about the ways that we could cooperate with North Korea, and I think we can cooperate in the agricultural zones. And this is an area that North Korea is interested in, and it is an area that we can also work on, which is developing seeds. Most of these seeds are brought from overseas, so it leads to management costs and problems of managing those seeds. So at the special zones in North Korea, a special area can be designated to develop seeds there, and Korean companies can go there to try out those seeds and develop those seeds. And developing seeds, it is not directly linked to with the sanctions, I believe. So that is a method. And livestock cooperation is another area that's possible for us. They were interested in the pig raising, and it has good protein. So they are very interested in livestock. And in Korea, we have issues with the manure coming from the livestock. So this is a problem for us, and we can work with North Korea on dealing with this livestock and agriculture. There's the fundamentals there, and to do the production, there is the back end and the front end activities such as fertilizers and machinery and the seeds. And in the downstream, there's the storage and processing. So in the overall picture, we can work in these special zones. There's the infrastructure, and through humanitarian aid, like public funding can be used. And later on, there has to be private investment. And the private and public funding, have to be complementary to one another. And the special zones can be areas where we can have that.
좌장께서 지금 당장
Well, you asked about what can be done right now. Well, this kind of seminar involving maybe North Korean experts to join in. This is something that we can do now. Of course, there are key political meetings that took place in DPRK or have recently been done online, like we're doing now. So North Korea already has such networks and communication systems in place. So maybe agricultural-related seminars can't be done offline, but perhaps we can do this over video conferencing to understand what kind of technological support they need and what kind of cooperation could take place. We could at least begin the talk. And this kind of conferences online on an international level can be, done. So we can involve, private sector, civil society NGOs, and maybe the government entities also, and all the stakeholders involved, including, of course, the North Korean counterparts. So that would be quite meaningful. And another thing, in creating a new agricultural development zone requires a lot of investment and significant infrastructure. So the existing infrastructure should be utilized. So maybe the infrastructure near the Kumgang Mountain or Kaesong Industrial Complex should be, considered in the overall development effort.
Thank you. Dr. Wieczkowski, Thomas?
Dr. Lee just stole my idea of Hwasan seminar.
Really?
I think it's a great idea. Exactly, we could exchange our thoughts with our colleagues in North Korea. What can be done now unconditionally? In general terms, I would say small-scale feasible projects, international, multinational projects. In terms of agriculture, I would say knowledge transfer, education, know-how, Nothing forbids us to invite, I'm European, so I would speak on behalf of European Union, for example, nothing forbids us to invite them to Denmark, to France, to European countries, and teach them best practices in agriculture. At the same time, by providing this education, we would expose North Korean farmers or North Korean specialists to European values. It would be a multidimensional education. So we could engage with people-to-people transfer, mobility of experts from North Korea in Europe. It's not against sanctions, and to be honest, it's a shame we don't do this. I would say education and knowledge transfer, expertise, knowledge in agriculture. This is what can be done on international level.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Zakernak?
Yeah, what can be done right now, especially with the COVID situation, is almost nothing. I like the idea of exchange through forums like this, but I think that needs some political decisions on the DPRK side, because even the staff in the FAO office are not allowed to use video conferencing. They're limited to using emails. But getting past that, I think the technology transfer, the training methodologies, things like that, are all things that can avoid UN sanctions and can still be delivered. The people going back and forth, the opportunities to visit overseas, I think those are the sorts of things that can be done. And then, I mean, in my presentation, I also said, look at any opportunities you can to empower people at the local level to develop their own counter policies, to make use of the resources for their own particular benefit. Just one final statement about, I think mention was made about DPRK existing in silos and the little coordination going on between different agencies. I think that's where we also have to know what the real situation is on the ground. My experience in China is you will not get the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of whatever to cooperate, but at a county level, at a local level, these guys all went to school together. They all know each other. So at a county level and at a lower level, that cooperation is very possible. So I'll finish with that.
Thank you very much. And Professor Ji in Yambian, what can we do now?
Yes, I think that developing seeds that will increase the yield and providing fertilizers. Looking at the production, they are in lack of 500,000 tons, so which is 10% of the total amount that they need. So they just need a 10% boost in the production. So if there is enough fertilizer provided, then they can increase their productivity by 10%, and good seeds and fertilizers, those are areas that do not go against the sanctions. So if there is the will, then it will be possible to support the necessary fertilizer. And then after that, a modern farming technology should be transferred. But the key point is fertilizers and good seeds. In China, in 2012, like I mentioned, at Najin, they operated a exemplary pilot farming, and the yield was twofold more than original yield. So they would have 300 ton, but it in some cases went up to 1,000. So if they have enough fertilizer, then they can increase their productivity.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Dr. Kim.
Well, what we can do right now, that's a very good question, a difficult question also. DPRK is suffering from natural disasters, sanctions, and COVID-19, which has been exacerbating the food shortage, and it's going to exacerbate further going forward. And also there are other typhoons on the way. So what we can do right now is to provide emergency aid, including food, health, medical supplies. So this is something that we need to get ready for North Korea. And Kim Jong-un said on December 10th, until then, we're not going to receive any external aid. But that means, on the flip side, after December 10th, they're willing to accept, aid. So perhaps because Kim Jong-un specified that date, so we can actually think on the reverse and maybe see the opportunity of giving aid after December 10th.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. Now, first of all, I want to say we didn't solve all the problems of DPRK's agriculture or economy today, but and we saw really what Dr. Witzlowski said. We have this huge gap of, on the one hand, super modern phosphate factory or phosphor factory and the hot houses. On the other hand, medieval farming, and we have to cope with that. Plus COVID-19, plus typhoons coming and maybe destroying huge farmlands in Hamgyongpukto and in other places. So we have to cope with it. But I'm now a little more confident or optimistic than before because of all these great ideas which came from our three presenters and from our three discussions. And though we are few in the room, now I want all of you to give them a big round of applause that the people on the screen can hear that also. That was really great. Thank you very much. And it's still the last seconds of the last minute, so let's work together in the future. And I want once again thank our organizer here, the Rural Research Institute, which organized this fabulous cooperation event, and I think we need to do more of that. And with this, we conclude this session. Thank you very much.